Chosen One, there is something you need to hear right now, not later, not when life finally settles down, not after you have one more answer or one more sign, right here, in this moment, wherever you are sitting, whatever heaviness followed you into this day, there is a truth already moving toward you. The battle that has occupied so much of your mind, your energy, and your heart has reached its conclusion. I am not talking about wishful thinking or something that might happen someday. I am talking about a reality that was already established before you could see it. There were nights when you stared at the ceiling long after everyone else was asleep, replaying the same questions over and over. There were mornings when you opened your eyes already tired, carrying a weight you could not explain to anyone around you, and still, somehow, you kept moving. Chosen One, hear these words slowly. You made it through. Let yourself sit with that for a moment, because for a long time you believed peace was something you had to earn. You learned to think rest came after achievement, after proving yourself, after becoming enough in the eyes of the world. Yet what is sacred has never measured your value that way. God has seen every part of what you just walked through. The uncertainty that stretched far longer than you expected. The prayers that seemed to disappear into silence. The moments when you kept showing up even though something inside you wanted to give up and disappear for a while. Heaven witnessed every step, including the ones nobody applauded. And if there were moments when you wondered whether anyone saw how hard you were trying, hear this clearly. You were seen. Every time you stayed kind when bitterness would have been easier. Every time you chose faith while carrying disappointment. Every time you got back up without any guarantee that things would change. None of it was invisible. Chosen One. If there were words spoken over this season, one of them would be congratulations. Not because you performed perfectly. Not because you reached some external milestone. Because you stayed present through a chapter that asked more from you than most people will ever understand. You remained when remaining no longer made logical sense. Maybe something is shifting in you as you hear this. Maybe there is a tension in your chest beginning to loosen. Maybe a part of you recognizes these words before your mind fully understands them. That feeling is deeper than emotion. It is recognition. It is the quiet part of you that has always known the truth, finally being given permission to breathe. This message is for the Chosen One who has been carrying a private battle. The Chosen One who smiled through conversations while carrying questions they could not explain. The Chosen One who stopped telling people how much they were hurting because they grew tired of being misunderstood. You are standing at a threshold now, and what comes next has been forming long before you could see it. If something inside you knows this message found you for a reason, type "The fight is done" in the comments. Let those words become a marker between where you have been and where you are going. Because the deepest battle was never the circumstances themselves. It was never only the delays, the obstacles, the disappointments, or the people who failed to understand you. The deepest battle happened inside you. It was the struggle to keep believing you were still worthy when life stopped giving you evidence. It was the struggle to trust that silence did not mean abandonment and delay did not mean rejection. There were moments when you watched other people receive what you had been praying for. Moments when you celebrated their blessings while quietly wondering when it would finally be your turn. There were moments when you questioned whether the identity of the Chosen One belonged to everyone except you. Those moments hurt more than most people realize. That was the real fight, and the reason it felt relentless was never because those voices were telling the truth. It felt relentless because you were closer than you knew. There is a pattern that appears again and again in the lives of Chosen Ones, and once you recognize it, you begin to see it everywhere. The strongest resistance often arrives just before the landscape changes. I call it the pre-arrival storm. It is that strange season when everything feels heavier than it should, when progress feels invisible, when you begin questioning things you once felt certain about. It is this stretch of road where many people assume they are lost, when in reality they are approaching something significant. Scripture reveals this pattern. Life reveals this pattern. The stories of countless Chosen Ones reveal this pattern. The pressure increases because the threshold is near. The resistance grows because movement is already happening beneath the surface. What feels like opposition is often evidence that something is shifting. Chosen One, there is something else I need to say. Some of you are listening with guarded hearts because hope has become complicated. You have heard encouraging words before. You have believed before. You have expected change before. And when disappointment followed, a part of you quietly learned how to protect itself. If that is where you are, I understand. I am not asking you to force yourself into optimism. I am not asking you to ignore your caution. I am simply asking you to stay present long enough to recognize the difference between empty encouragement and a truth your spirit already knows. Because the beginning of this fight was not what most people think. Many messages talk about spiritual warfare. Many messages talk about perseverance. Few stop long enough to name the wound beneath the battle itself. The wound began much earlier than the struggle you have been trying to survive. At some point, perhaps so early that you cannot even remember when it started, you began believing that your worth depended on what you produced. You learned that love felt safer when you succeeded. You learned that belonging felt easier when you proved your value. You learned to measure yourself through performance before you ever realized you were doing it. This is the wound beneath the wound. And for the Chosen One, it becomes especially painful because your calling often grows long before there is visible evidence to support it. You feel something inside you that cannot yet be explained. You sense a deeper purpose that has not fully arrived. And while you wait, the wound begins to whisper. It tells you that if people could see the real you, it tells you that you need to become someone else before you deserve to be loved. It tells you that your delays are proof of your inadequacy, rather than evidence of your preparation. But Chosen One, that voice has never been your identity. It is the echo of a wound, and there is a difference between who you are and what happened to you. The healing begins the moment you stop confusing the two. Chosen One, this wound cuts especially deep because you have always sensed something inside you that was larger than your current circumstances. When a calling exists within you before there is visible evidence around you, it becomes difficult to explain what you know in your spirit to people who only believe what they can see. The vision lives inside long before it appears outside, and in that gap, the wound finds its voice. It begins comparing your life to people who already seem to have what you are still waiting for. It whispers that if the results are not visible, then the purpose must not be real. Over time, that voice becomes so familiar that many Chosen Ones mistake it for truth. But hear me clearly, Chosen One, you are never lacking discipline, and you were never missing some quality everyone else possessed. You were carrying an unseen wound, and that wound made it harder to fully stand inside what you were being prepared for. That is a very different story from the one you have been telling yourself. Once you can name the wound, you can begin to see how it operated. Healing often begins with recognition. The worthiness wound redirects your energy away from the path itself and toward proving that you deserve to walk it. Instead of moving forward, you spend years trying to earn permission for something that was already yours to step into. You explain yourself to people who were never meant to validate your purpose. You wait for approval, reassurance, signs, or evidence before allowing yourself to move. And while you are waiting, life quietly passes by. When that validation never comes or arrives in ways that feel incomplete, the wound only grows deeper. That is why this season felt so exhausting. It was never only about the challenges in front of you. It was the invisible effort of carrying an argument inside your own mind every day. Some of you know exactly what that feels like because you replayed conversations, questioned decisions, and carried far more than anyone around you ever realized. Yet none of it was wasted. Not the self-doubt, not the hesitation, and not even the moments when you felt stuck. You were being healed while you were being stretched, and refined while you were being tested. What felt like delay was often deeper work happening beneath the surface, work that could not be rushed. There is someone listening who has carried this wound for so long that they no longer recognize it as a wound. They believe insecurity is simply their personality, and they assume their need for reassurance is just who they are. But Chosen One, I want to speak directly to that part of you. That is not who you are. That is what happened to you. and those two things are not the same. The chosen one beneath the wound is stronger than you realize. Your depth, your compassion, and your ability to sense what others carry beneath their words will forge the experiences that required you to travel through places inside yourself that most people spend their lives avoiding. You did not become strong despite what you went through. In many ways, you became who you are through it. The fire did not erase you. It revealed you. The pressure did not destroy what was real. It exposed what could endure. If this speaks to something you have been carrying, type "I am built, not broken" in the comments, and let those words remind you of what this season was actually producing inside you. Now let me show you where you are today. Not where you were at the beginning of the fight, but where you are right now. There is a moment in every chosen one journey that arrives quietly. It feels less like a dramatic breakthrough and more like standing near the ocean and realizing the tide has changed before anyone else notices. Something beneath the surface shifts. The pressure that once felt endless begins to loosen, and the resistance that followed you everywhere starts losing its grip. What was moving against you begins moving differently, and I believe that moment has already happened for many of you. You may not recognize it because the external evidence has not fully arrived yet. But if you pay attention, the signs are there. You react differently than you used to. Certain fears no longer control you, and battles that once consumed your energy no longer carry the same power. Chosen one, you are standing at an inflection point. The hardest part of this chapter is behind you. The same situations that once felt overwhelming are becoming manageable. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because you are no longer carrying the same internal burden while facing them. Your sense of direction is also returning. During the storm, every decision felt heavy, and every path uncertain. Now, clarity begins arriving in quieter ways. You stop wrestling with every next step and begin trusting what you already know, and perhaps most importantly, your relationship with time begins to heal. For so long, every delay felt personal, and every unanswered prayer felt like another closed door. But now, something deeper is settling inside you. The waiting was not punishment. The waiting was preparation. The waiting was cultivation. The person emerging from this season is not the same person who entered it. People may have noticed the silence, the distance, or the tiredness in your eyes, but they could not see the work happening beneath the surface. God saw every unseen moment, every private surrender, and every choice to keep going. If something is opening inside you as you hear these words, stay with that feeling. The deepest shifts often happen quietly, and the turning point frequently arrives long before the evidence does. That is why many chosen ones misunderstand what comes next. It is not enough to know the fight is ending. You must also recognize the patterns it created. If those patterns remain unquestioned, they can follow you into the very season you prayed for. What comes next is not simply about moving forward. It is about moving forward differently. There is something about breakthrough that almost nobody talks about. Chosen one. People spend years preparing for the battle and praying for relief. Yet few are prepared for what happens after the storm begins to pass. When the fight ends, the habits created during the fight do not always leave with it. There is a window of vulnerability many chosen ones never expect. It is not a threat from outside of you. It is the tendency to keep living from old survival patterns even after the season that created them has ended. The mind may understand that things are changing, but the body often takes longer to believe it. You learned how to protect yourself. You learned how to lower expectations before disappointment could find you, and how to prepare for loss before allowing yourself to hope. Those patterns were not weaknesses. They were survival strategies, but survival strategies have a way of lingering. This is what I call the soldier's return. The battle ends, yet part of you is still listening for danger. The crisis passes, but your shoulders remain tense. The pressure lifts, but your nervous system continues acting as if it is waiting for the next blow. Maybe you still look for signs that something is about to go wrong, even during peaceful moments. Maybe good news feels difficult to trust, because part of you is already preparing for disappointment. Chosen one, that is not because you are broken. It is because you have been carrying armor for a very long time. The danger is not that the battle continues. The danger is that you continue relating to life as though the battle never ended. You hesitate at opportunities, question blessings, and keep people at a distance because old experiences taught you to expect loss. But hear this clearly. The fight shaped you, yet it does not own you. There is a shift available to you now. It is the movement from the posture of the fighter into the posture of the receiver. The fighter braces, survives, and carries weight. The receiver opens, trusts, and allows goodness to arrive without immediately questioning whether it belongs there. For some of you, receiving feels harder than fighting ever did. Fighting gave you a role and something to push against. Receiving asks you to believe that not every blessing has to be earned through exhaustion. For the chosen one carrying a worthiness wound that can feel deeply uncomfortable, part of you still believes love must be earned, peace must be earned, and rest must be justified. So when something good approaches, your instinct is to ask what you must do to deserve it. But receiving is not passivity. Receiving is alignment. It is allowing yourself to become available to what has already been moving toward you. The first step is releasing the story your circumstances have been telling you. The difficult season was real, but it was never the final definition of who you are. The struggle described a chapter. It never described your identity. The second step is opening your posture. Open your hands, soften the places inside yourself that have remained clenched for too long, and let your body learn what your spirit already knows. The third step is speaking differently about where you are, refusing to keep repeating stories that belong to a season you have already outgrown. Take a moment right now and notice your shoulders. Notice the tension your body may still be carrying, and the places where months of vigilance have settled inside you. Take a slow breath, and as you exhale, allow something to soften. Let your shoulders lower. Let your chest expand. Let your body receive the truth. Your spirit has been trying to tell it, the fight is over. Sometimes the body needs to hear that truth just as much as the mind does. If something released inside you as you read this, comment "release" below. Let that word mark the moment your body finally stopped carrying what your spirit had already surrendered. Now let me speak directly to another chosen one. You survived the fire and made it through. Yet when you look around, the evidence does not seem to match what happened inside you. The bank account still tells an old story, some relationships still carry old scars, and the calling you feel so deeply remains hidden from public view. Because of that gap, a voice keeps asking whether anything truly changed, but that voice deserves to be challenged. One of the hardest moments in a chosen one's journey comes after the internal breakthrough and before the external evidence appears. It is the space where transformation is real, yet still invisible. Many people turn back during that season, not because they failed, but because they mistake invisibility for absence. Yet that is not how transformation works. A seed changes long before anyone sees a sprout, and roots deepen long before branches appear. Chosen one, what changed inside you is real. The courage is real. The healing is real. The clarity is real. The peace emerging within you is real. External evidence is simply slower, and the world often takes time to catch up with the transformation that already happened inside. So stop waiting for visible proof before honoring your growth. You do not need public recognition before your calling becomes valid, and you do not need visible results before your transformation becomes true. The fight is over, because it is over, and the evidence is still arriving. Walk forward while it arrives. And chosen one, the fact that you are still here, still listening, and still leaning into this message says something important about you. In a world built on distraction, you stayed long enough for something deeper to reach you. That kind of attention belongs to someone who is ready for more than inspiration. It belongs to someone who is ready to receive. Stay with me for a moment, chosen one, because there is something important you need to understand about the season you just survived. Every battle leaves something behind. Every difficult chapter shapes something within you. The question is not whether this season changed you. The question is whether you recognize what it placed in your hands before it ended. Nothing you walked through was empty. Nothing was wasted. Even the days that felt confusing, even the moments when you wondered whether you were making any progress at all, were contributing to something deeper than you could see at the time. The storm was not only testing you, it was building you. The first thing it built was a kind of authority that cannot be borrowed from anyone else, not authority that comes from titles, recognition, or people agreeing with you. This is the authority that comes from surviving something that could have broken you and discovering that what was real within you remained standing. People feel that kind of authority before you ever speak about it. There is a difference between knowledge and wisdom, and the chosen one learns that difference in seasons like this. Knowledge can be gathered. Wisdom is lived. When you have sat in silence long enough, when you have wrestled with questions that had no immediate answers, something changes in the way you carry yourself. Others may not understand why your words affect them differently now, but they can feel the weight of experience behind them. The second thing this season produced is discernment. You see things now that you could not see before. You notice patterns. You sense what is genuine and what is merely performance. You have become more aware of what brings peace and what quietly drains it away. This is not cynicism. It is clarity earned through experience. Chosen one, there were people you trusted too quickly in the past. There were situations you ignored your instincts about because you wanted the best to be true. Life taught you lessons that were expensive to learn, yet those lessons sharpened something valuable within you. The discernment you carry now will protect what you are building in the season ahead. The third gift is compassion, not the kind that comes from theory, but the kind that comes from understanding pain firsthand. You know what it feels like to smile while carrying something heavy. You know what it feels like to sit in a room full of people and still feel alone. Because you know that feeling, you have become someone who can truly see others when they are carrying it too. That is why the chosen one who emerges from a difficult season is never the same person who entered it. You are deeper now, more patient in some ways, more aware in others. There are parts of you that only existed as potential before this season, and now exist as reality. What you carry today is exactly what the next chapter requires. And this is where many chosen ones become frustrated. They recognize the growth, but they still feel a gap between what they know and how fully they are able to live from it. They can sense the change inside themselves. Yet there are moments when clarity feels inconsistent. Moments when they know what matters but struggle to move with the confidence they expected to have by now. If that sounds familiar, I want you to hear this carefully. The fog you have been experiencing is not proof that you failed to learn the lesson. It is not evidence that you missed your moment. It is often the natural result of carrying a great deal for a very long time. There were seasons when you had to remain alert. Seasons when you were constantly evaluating, adapting, enduring, and recovering. That kind of prolonged pressure leaves an imprint. It can make even simple decisions feel heavier than they need to feel. It can make clarity seem farther away than it actually is. Many chosen ones mistake this exhaustion for a flaw in their character. They assume they should be stronger by now. They assume they should have figured everything out already. Yet what they are experiencing is often something much more human. They have been carrying too much for too long, and they're only now beginning to put some of it down. I want to be honest with you about something. I cannot tell you exactly when every visible piece of your life will align with the transformation that has already happened inside you. No one can honestly promise that. What I can tell you is that there is a pattern when chosen ones stop fighting themselves, when they stop measuring their progress only through external evidence, when they stop treating healing like another performance requirement. Something begins to open. The distance between what they know and what they live starts becoming smaller. The wisdom they gain during the battle begins taking root in everyday life. Maybe that is where you are right now. Maybe the invitation in this season is not to strive harder, but to trust more deeply. Maybe the next step is not proving yourself again. Maybe it is allowing yourself to believe that the growth already happened, and that life is slowly catching up to it. The chosen one often spends years asking, "What am I supposed to become?" Yet after a season like this, a better question begins to emerge. Who have I already become? Sit with that for a moment, because the answer may reveal that far more has changed than you realized. The strength is already there. The discernment is already there. The compassion is already there. The authority is already there. And perhaps what comes next is not about becoming someone new. Perhaps it is about finally trusting the person this journey has already shaped you to be. Chosen one, the person who came through this fight, is not the same person who entered it. You now carry an authority earned through experience, a discernment sharpened by disappointment, and a compassion that only comes from walking through valleys few people truly understand. The season ahead deserves the fullest version of who you have become, not the version of yourself that was forced to live in survival mode. For a long time, you adapted to pressure. You learned how to keep moving while carrying uncertainty, exhaustion, and questions that never seemed to receive immediate answers. What began as a temporary survival response slowly started feeling normal, and many chosen ones eventually stopped questioning the fog, the fatigue, and the distance between what they know deep inside and what they are able to access each day. But chosen one, consider this for a moment. What if the tired version of you was never the real version of you? What if the version that was constantly bracing, carrying, and managing pressure was simply the version required to survive a difficult chapter? There is a difference between who you are and how you adapted. And while the fight required adaptation, the next season requires embodiment. Many people spend their lives defining themselves by the season that wounded them. They become skilled at surviving but unfamiliar with freedom, learning how to endure difficulty while struggling to receive goodness when it finally arrives. You are being invited into something different, not because you have become perfect, but because the journey already produced what it was meant to produce. The strength is already there. The wisdom is already there. The discernment and compassion are already there. What remains is learning to live from those gifts instead of constantly searching for proof that you possess them. Now let me speak about something deeper. The battle left behind more than exhaustion. It left behind a story. During the hardest moments, you created narratives that helped you survive. You told yourself that if you held on a little longer, things would eventually change. And those stories carried you through nights and seasons that offered very little visible evidence. Those stories served you well. They kept you moving when standing still felt easier, and they helped you carry hope to uncertainty. But chosen one, there comes a moment when survival stories must evolve, because the person who enters a new season while still living from an old story never fully arrives where they are. Part of them remains behind. Part of them keeps expecting disappointment, preparing for storms that have already passed, and viewing blessings through the lens of old fears. The story that carried you through the fight was necessary, but the story that carries you forward must be different. The story is no longer about surviving. It is about arriving, receiving, and building. It is about becoming fully present inside the life you spent years preparing for and allowing yourself to inhabit it without constantly looking over your shoulder. Chosen one, there is something powerful about reaching the end of a long season and realizing that what changed most was not your circumstances. The waiting shaped you. The silence shaped you. The disappointments and unseen moments shaped you. Now you stand at a threshold, carrying gifts that did not exist in the same way before this journey began. Imagine what changes when you stop introducing yourself to the future through the language of the past. Imagine what changes when you stop expecting every open door to close. Stop assuming every delay means denial, and stop treating your healing as incomplete simply because it is still becoming visible. That is the invitation before you now, and I believe something inside you already recognizes it. The chosen one who stayed with this message this long is not here by accident. You stayed because something within you recognizes this moment and understands that you are standing between who you were and who you are becoming. The fight is over. You made it through, and what was forged in the fire remains. And what remains is exactly what was needed. If something inside you recognizes that you are standing at that threshold right now, type "I am at the threshold" in the comments. Let that moment be marked as the quiet declaration that the chapter of surviving has ended and the chapter of arriving has begun. Chosen one, before we come to the end of this message, I want to take you somewhere for a moment. Not into fantasy or wishful thinking, but into something that may already be forming beneath the surface of your life. I want you to picture a morning 6 months from now. You wake before the alarm, and for a brief moment, before the responsibilities of the day arrive, you notice something different. The familiar tension that once greeted you every morning is gone. The heaviness you carried for so long has quietly loosened its grip, and in its place is something steadier. You lie there for a moment, surprised by the stillness. Not emptiness or numbness, but peace. The kind of peace that feels like setting down a weight you carried for so long you forgot it was there. The kind that arrives when a question you lived with for years no longer needs an answer because something deeper has settled it. As the day begins, the first thought that rises is different too. It is not urgency, fear, or the habit of scanning for what might go wrong next. Instead, a quieter question appears. What is mine to build today? That version of you is real. Chosen one, not because life suddenly becomes perfect or every challenge disappears, but because the person you have been becoming throughout this season naturally thinks, feels, and moves differently than the person who entered it. Now come back to this moment. Notice the distance between who you are today and the version of yourself you just imagined. That distance is smaller than you think because it is not measured primarily in months. It is measured in a shift from fighting to receiving, from surviving to arriving, and from constantly looking backward to finally moving forward. I know there may be resistance rising inside you as you hear that. There may be a voice saying you have heard words like these before. And there may be memories of moments when hope felt close only to be followed by disappointment. Perhaps part of you learned to protect itself by expecting less so it would hurt less. Chosen one, that response makes sense. You have carried enough unanswered questions to become cautious and walked through enough delays to stop trusting easy promises. But sometimes the problem was never that the promise was false. Sometimes the struggle was that your wounded heart could only receive part of what was being offered because it was still busy protecting itself from pain. That does not mean the promise was untrue. It means healing was still taking place. And for some of you, that realization changes everything because there has been a quiet belief beneath the surface that this message is meant for someone else. Maybe someone stronger, someone more deserving, someone whose mistakes were fewer or whose faith felt cleaner. But chosen one, that voice is not wisdom. That is the worthiness wound speaking one last time, repeating the old lie that grace must be earned and value must be proven. Your worth was never dependent on your performance. You do not become worthy because you finally succeed. You begin from worthiness. That truth existed before the struggle, remained during the struggle, and remains true now. So let me tell you what this season reveals about who you really are. You are not merely a fighter, though you proved you can fight. You are not merely a survivor, though you proved you can survive. The deeper truth is that you are a builder, someone carrying the wisdom, depth, and perspective required to create what could only be built through experience. The authority you gained is not compensation for your suffering. The discernment you gained is not compensation for your waiting. The compassion you gained is not compensation for your pain. They are tools placed into your hands because there are things ahead that require exactly what this season produced. That is why none of it was wasted. There are moments in life when everything begins quietly aligning beneath the surface. No dramatic signs announce them. Instead, you begin noticing that old fears have less authority, your decisions carry less hesitation, and your spirit feels more settled than before. That is how a threshold often reveals itself. Not through noise, but through recognition, and I believe many of you are standing in one of those moments right now. The season behind you lasted longer than expected. The waiting tested you deeply, and the silence asked more from you than felt fair. Yet readiness was being formed through every part of it. Not readiness for perfection, but readiness for stewardship, responsibility, and what comes next. So stay present a little longer, chosen one, because what comes next is more than encouragement. It is the truth your spirit has been preparing to receive ever since this fight began. Chosen one, before we reach the end of this message, I want to leave you with one final pattern from this season. I call it the gentle migration. It is gentle because most people barely notice it while it is happening. And it is a migration because it is the quiet movement from one way of being into another. Often, you only realize it happened after you have already stepped into a different version of yourself. The gentle migration begins after the fight, not when everything is perfect or every prayer has visibly manifested. It begins when something inside you finally loosens its grip. The waiting starts to feel different, and the urgency that once lived in your chest begins to soften. In its place comes a quieter expectancy, a feeling that something is unfolding without needing to be forced. You may notice yourself waking up with less heaviness than before. You may find that your mind is no longer constantly rehearsing worst-case scenarios, and situations you once pushed so hard to control begin moving on their own timeline. At first, that can feel unfamiliar, because struggle became so normal that peace almost feels strange. Chosen one, this is not your imagination. This is what happens when an internal shift begins expressing itself in the world around you. Small signs start appearing, conversations arrive at the right moment, doors open without exhausting effort, and answers emerge where confusion once lived. The world begins responding to the transformation that already happened within you. Because this season is different, your role is different too. During the fight, your role was endurance. During the gentle migration, your role is openness. You do not force this process forward. You receive it while continuing the practices that kept you connected during the hardest days. Some opportunities will begin carrying a different feeling than before. During the battle, everything seemed wrapped in tension, uncertainty, and risk. Now certain paths will come with a quiet sense of rightness, not because every detail is clear, but because your spirit no longer needs to wrestle with every step. Trust that feeling, because your discernment was refined for this very purpose. The gentle migration also changes relationships. Some people who occupied a large space in your life during the fight may naturally drift away, not because anyone failed, but because seasons change and alignment changes with them. At the same time, people connected to the person you are becoming often arrive with surprising ease. Pay attention to that. Not every ending is a loss, and not every distance is rejection. Sometimes life is simply creating room for what belongs in the next chapter. What once felt like an empty space may actually be an open space. There is also a kind of celebration that follows completion. It is rarely loud or dramatic. More often, it arrives as a quiet recognition that the cost was real, the endurance was real, the sacrifice was real, and the growth was real too. Completion often feels less like fireworks and more like finally exhaling a breath you did not realize you were holding. Sometimes it shows up as peace. Sometimes it arrives as a subtle sense that something has shifted, even if you cannot yet explain what changed. If that feeling has been present while listening to this message, honor it. The new season often enters quietly. Now I want you to do something with me. If you are somewhere safe, close your eyes for a moment. If not, soften your gaze and let the world around you fade into the background. Bring your attention to your chest and simply notice what is there without trying to change it. Think of one moment from the fight that cost you more than anyone knows. You do not need to relive it. Simply acknowledge it. You were there. You survived it. And you carried the weight it required. Now take a slow breath and imagine setting that burden down. You are not denying it or forgetting it. You are releasing it because the season that created it is complete. You do not have to carry yesterday's weight into tomorrow's chapter. In the space that opens, allow something else to arrive without forcing it or naming it too quickly. Maybe what arrives is peace. Maybe it is hope, clarity, or the quiet realization that you are stronger than you knew. Whatever comes, let it come. That feeling is real, and it has been waiting for room. Open your eyes and return to this moment. You are here. The fight is behind you, and the new season has already begun. If something shifted inside you just now, type "received" in the comments. Let that be your first declaration from this new place you are stepping into. Chosen one, there is something I have carried throughout this entire message, and I want to leave it with you now. You are not who the fight tried to convince you that you were. You are not the person defined by the hardest chapter of your life. You are someone who has been refined. Think of metal placed into fire. The fire does not change what it is made of, but it reveals what it can become. The same material enters and exits the process, yet it emerges able to carry more, endure more, and serve a greater purpose because of what it passed through. The same is true for you. You entered this season carrying a calling, and you emerged carrying the capacity to hold it. The fight did not expose weakness. It revealed strength, depth, resilience, and parts of you that even you had not fully met before now. So receive this, chosen one. You are not late, and you are not behind. You have been moving through a process that cannot be measured by ordinary timelines. What looked like delay was often preparation. What looked like silence was often formation, and what appeared to be standing still was deep work happening beneath the surface. When heaven says, "Congratulations," it is not because you arrived without struggle. It is because you remained faithful to something precious, while everything around you tempted you to let it go. You carried hope when certainty was unavailable, stayed open when disappointment would have been easier, and kept showing up when no outcome was guaranteed. Chosen one, that is not ordinary. That is extraordinary, and that is why this season will always mean more than you realize. There is someone listening right now who desperately needed to hear that. They have spent so much time replaying what did not work, measuring themselves against goals they never reached, and carrying disappointment about opportunities that slipped away during the fight. They've been keeping score of every setback while overlooking the courage it took simply to remain standing. But hear this clearly. A difficult battle may contain losses, mistakes, and moments where you stumble, yet none of those moments have the authority to define the outcome. The war was never decided by one hard day or one season of exhaustion. It was decided by whether you kept moving when everything inside you wanted to quit. And chosen one, you did keep moving. You made it through. The war is won, and the fight is over. Let us mark this threshold together and acknowledge that something has ended while something new has begun. Release every accusation that attached itself to your identity during the fight. Release every voice that told you that you were not enough, every disappointment that seemed to confirm it, and every moment that made you question your worth. Those voices were never the final word over your life. Release the pressure of the timeline you have been carrying. Release the fear that you are running out of time, the belief that opportunities passed you by, and the feeling that everyone else arrived while you were left behind. What belongs to you remains available to you, and what is meant for you does not expire because the journey took longer than expected. Release the smaller version of yourself that survival taught you to become, the version that expected less, dreamed less boldly, and became cautious with hope, served a purpose. It helped you survive, but it does not belong in the season you are entering now. And release the loneliness too. Release the nights you carried burdens nobody understood, and the moments you felt unseen. Every tear, every prayer, every private surrender, and every step you took without recognition was witnessed. None of it was invisible. The season ahead carries a different energy. It is not isolation but connection, not constant striving but alignment, not carrying everything alone but walking with the right people. That shift matters more than you know. Chosen one, there is something remarkable about the fact that you are still here. You are the cycle breaker. You are the one who kept walking when stopping would have made perfect sense. You arrived at this threshold, carrying wisdom that could only be earned through experience. That is why your authority carries weight. not because it was handed to you, but because it was forged. What was forged within you during this season is real, and this chapter of completion is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the chapter that everything else was preparing you for. You are the chosen one who made it through, and you are not returning to who you were before. If this message speaks to your spirit, type, "I will never go back" in the comments. Let those words become the line between the person who was in the fight and the person who emerged from it. To every chosen one who stayed until this moment, remember this: what you gained is more valuable than what you lost. The wisdom is real, the discernment is real, the healing is real, the calling is real, and the new season is real. Walk forward with open hands. Receive what is arriving. Build what you are always being prepared to build. Chosen one, you have crossed the threshold. You are prepared, strengthened, and complete. And so it is.